Closing the deal is everything when it comes to sales, right? Well, wrong. Closing a deal might be the end goal in sales, but starting the conversation is what sales is really all about. After all, if you can't start a conversation, then you're never going to close a deal in the first place. So how do you start that sales conversation? Hey everyone, I'm Ian Campbell. I'm CEO of Mission Suite. Before we jump into today's video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so that you're notified every time that we post new videos. Now, I've been in sales for a little over 20 years. When I first started, I always thought that it was just the natural gift of gab that would get me into a sales conversation. Since I was relatively good at it, I never really worried too much about it. But then I got to a point where I wanted to take a bit more control over those conversations. See, when I was just relying on my gift, I realized that it was taking me a really long time to get to the point of the actual sales part of the conversation. It was fine when the conversation would end up leading to a new client, but other times I was spending valuable time chatting up a friendly person who had absolutely no interest in doing business with me. While I got to know some great people, it didn't really help me grow my business. So I decided that I was going to get more specific with the way that I actually started my conversations. Turns out it worked. I ended up getting focused on my time on those conversations and really dialing in with those people who actually wanted to do business with me. And as a result, my business grew. Surprise, surprise, right? Now, it's not that I didn't talk to people who weren't good prospects for me. I just knew earlier why we were talking, and as a result, could refocus my expectations and adjust accordingly. So, let's take a look at the process that I set up for myself to start a real conversation with a sales prospect. Step one, tell them who you are. This may sound like an obvious one, but hear me out. It doesn't matter if we're out at a networking event, if we're making a cold call, maybe dropping into a business somewhere. We all have the tendency to look for that magical opening line. And you know exactly what I'm talking about too. That opening line that no one is ever going to want to say no to. That one that's going to pique the interest of even the most reluctant of prospects. Well, that line, it doesn't exist, so stop looking for it. What's more, there's nothing worse than having someone walk up to you and start asking you random questions or laying out some half-baked metaphor about problems that they're solving before you even know their name. I've had so many people prospect me with some goofy version of I square circles and then dive into some story about those circles that they're squaring before they finally tell me what their company is and what they do. And by the time that they finally get there, my eyes have completely glazed over and I've pretty much checked out of that conversation. When push comes to shove, the only thing that your contacts really need to know is who you are and how you might be able to help them solve a problem. Now that may sound cynical, but it's true. So stop trying to be clever and just tell me who you are. So start at the beginning. Who are you? Obviously, you don't need to give them your entire life story. At this point in the relationship, people don't need to know where you came from or how you got to where you are today. They don't need to know what college you went to or where you grew up. They just need to know who you are now. So open with that. Truthfully, you don't need anything more than a direct statement, and it can be pretty short. Something like, hi, I'm Ian with Mission Suite. We're a CRM and sales automation software platform. It's enough to start a conversation. Now, the next step in this little process that I dialed in for myself is to tell them why they should care about who I am. And this is really the important aspect of that opening part of the sales conversation, why they should actually care about who I am. Again, directness equals value here. Because you haven't shown any interest in me beyond my name and my company name, and that last one's kind of a maybe, you're still probably looking for a reason to keep talking to me. So I'm originally from the East Coast, and I came up doing business in some of the major cities back there. Now I talk to other East Coasters, and I joke about the fact that it always felt like I had 15 seconds to show anyone why I was worth talking to, and then why they should give me another 15 seconds to continue the conversation. And that's really kind of what I'm talking about here, only maybe not quite as abrupt. Why should I care about who you are? What is knowing who you are going to do for me to help my life get better? How will knowing who you are help my business become more successful? When talking to a prospect, these are the questions that are immediately going through their mind after you introduce yourself. And that's why you tend to hear them say, okay. So answer that question. How you answer that question is probably going to vary from situation to situation, but again, be direct. I help businesses grow by helping their salespeople get more initial sales appointments and making sure that deals keep moving through the sales process without falling through the cracks. Straight to the point, no fluff. Just what they need to hear to know if I provide a solution to a problem that they want help solving. Oftentimes, this will lead to a question from the prospect that I'm talking to and maybe a bit of tangential conversation. That's okay to let the conversation wander a bit to answer those questions, but be careful not to completely lose control. You don't want to get so far down a rabbit hole that it doesn't make sense to bring it back to the primary conversation. And also keep in mind, not everybody wants help solving the problem that you think that they should be solving. So if there's no interest, that's fine. It's not an offense to you. They're not fools. They're not blind to the issues in their business. There could be a million perfectly good reasons why that's true. Just move on. Now I want to hear from you. What's your favorite opening line to start a sales conversation? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're down there, do me a favor, give this video a like to let us know that you're getting some value out of it. Next, they need to know what they're going to get from listening to you. Now we're getting to the point where we're setting for the best part, the follow-up meeting. Sales aren't made in the initial conversation anymore. The one called close has really mostly become a thing of the past because of the vast amount of information to which people have access these days. Given that, you have to let them know what value they're going to get from listening to you specifically. Think of it this way. If you're asking for 30 minutes of my time, let's say I'm at an equivalent salary of $150 an hour. That's a $75 ask that you're making. I'd better get something out of it in return. So what real benefit will they get from spending time with you? Typically, just learning more about your product or service isn't really going to cut it. Unless I'm tasked with learning about that specifically or evaluating different offerings, that's more of a benefit to you than it is to me. But there are all sorts of benefits to getting together with someone in your field. Unless I'm also in that field, you have a ton of information that I don't have and want someone to discuss it with me. Maybe what I'll get is a bit of education. Maybe it's a better understanding of just how I can implement something like your product or service into my business, regardless of whether it is your product or service. Maybe it's just new ideas that I can use to grow my business. Those are the things that have real value, but they have to be focused on the benefit to the prospect, not to you. Now it's time to get them talking. Finally, this is where you get to jump in and start asking some sort of probing question to start to try to qualify them a little bit. Obviously, this introduction formula is very prospect focused, as it should be, but let's not lose sight of the fact that there are plenty of people who are willing to sit down with you and take up your time with no real need for your product or service and no real intention of ever actually buying anything from you. Hopefully, you know some solid open-ended questions to gauge someone's interest in what you're doing. But if not, try something like, does that sound like something that would be helpful in your business? Try, have you ever done anything like this before? What sort of results would you expect to see from something like this? You're obviously going to need to customize these for your business, and there are a million other questions that you can ask. But now it's time to get them talking so that you can figure out if it's something that they're interested in and if they're actually worth your time from a sales perspective. And if they are, now you get to set up your follow-up meeting. I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, maybe give it a share so that others can see it too. That always does a lot for us in the YouTube algorithm so that other people can see it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that bell so that you're notified every time that we post new videos. And while you're at it, check out the videos on your screen, and we will see you next time around. Cheers.